Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Shattered Silence, Stories of Recovery and Resilience. My name is Jori. Today we're going to kind of go into, I guess, a little bit more of my life, my childhood. If you know me, then you know this story of one of my best friends, Ashley Castle, who passed away when we were 10. When I was young, she was one of my first friends that I met going to Columbia Elementary School, and we just were inseparable. She was just one of those friends that you met when you were little and you just did everything together. You know, I took her on trips to Bass Lake. We would go, we really would do everything together. We were spending the night at my house or her house or whatever, and she was just my best friend. So growing up, I just remember my parents were the best parents and still are the best parents. So growing up, she didn't live very far from me. You know, we were in elementary school, so we lived in the same area, but there was this one busy street that separated our neighborhoods. And so it was parent-teacher conference week towards the beginning of the school year, so in October. So it was just, we got out early this week and we were at my house and we were riding bikes and we were just like, hey, we're going to go ride our bike over to Ashley's house. And it was just kind of like, okay, well, be careful. Don't be too long, you know. And so we were just riding our bikes. We stopped by at one of our friends' house and it was just that was just a normal thing when I was growing up. And so then it was starting to get dark. It was maybe around 5 o'clock. And so at that time in October, that's right kind of before sunset. So I remember Ashley's parents okay, you guys need to hurry up. It's going to start getting dark soon. So if you're going to ride back, you got to do it now. And so we rode straight back to my house. But on the corner of Brim Hall and Winsong, which if you are from Bakersfield and you know the area, you've seen that little angel statue on the corner over there. It has a plaque that you can read to with her name on it. At that corner where we were standing, there was no stoplight at the time. It was just a simple crosswalk. There wasn't even a stop sign. And so she started across the street and I saw the car coming and she didn't. And so she was in the middle of the street and I called her name and I just said, Ashley, stop. And then she turned and she looked at me and she got hit by a car. And this car was going over 50 miles an hour. And it's been, 21 years and I still tear up thinking about it because it was so traumatic as a little girl. It was seriously like the movies. She turned and looked at me and that's when she got hit. I remember her being on her bike and just she just kind of flew down the street. And I'm shaking right now thinking about it because I was shaking so bad, in shock. I'm like, what in the world just happened? Yeah, so when I was sitting there at that corner, I just remember cars started to pull over. People were walking on the street or on the sidewalk and they saw what happened. They stopped and they immediately came over. And I remember a car that had pulled over was just oh my gosh, where are her parents? Do they live nearby? And I'm like, yeah, they live right there. We just came from her house. And she was just get in the car. We're going to take you to her parents. I'm like, I'm not going in the car with you. And I remember even then, in shock, I was I'm not getting in a stranger's car. And I was I live right across the street right there. And so this woman, instead of having me get into her car, I remember her walking me across the street and I was shaking. I was still terrified to cross the street, even though she was there with me. And so I walked across the street and I even remember my exact shoes. I was in these the monkey Paul Frank, right? I was in these Paul Frank flip-flops and I ran straight out of them. I remember seeing them on the sidewalk because I just ran straight out of them and I sprinted all the way home. And I remember flinging that front door open, and my mom was in the kitchen, and she was cooking dinner. And I just remember opening up that door and screaming, "Ashley got hit by a car." And then my mom, I still remember my mom's face too, like, what? And we all hopped in my dad's truck, and, it was right 2 streets away from my house. So we went back there, and, it's not like she was just left there by herself. People had stopped at that point. But, my mom and my parents, they were out there, and the ambulance had gotten there, and they were about to take her in the ambulance. And my mom's like, I'm going to go with her, because her parents had actually just left their house to go take her younger sister to gymnastics class. And so my mom, I want to say my mom had called her, and, I just am thinking about it now. I never thought to ask her about that phone call that she had to make, which I'm sure was just as traumatic for her, like having, a child hanging out with your other daughter, and you have to call the parent to let them know that something tragic has just happened. And so my mom was going to go in the ambulance with Ashley, but just as the ambulance was about to leave, her parents actually showed up, and her mom was able to go with her. So she was taken to Kern Medical in Bakersfield, and she was in the ICU for a couple days. She had severe brain damage. We were not wearing helmets, and they had to remove a bone in her forehead just to relieve some pressure from her brain. And what's crazy is I was not told this again. I remember all of this from just being 10 years old. It's just crazy that you remember all of these details as a little kid. And so, I remember, I will keep bringing up my parents, because now being a parent, I can't imagine trying to just be there for your child that's just experienced something so traumatic. And so I'm sure this decision of letting me see my friend in the ICU or not was a big decision. And I can't say whether it was the right or wrong decision at this point. I don't know. I saw Ashley in the ICU. She did not look like herself. Her eyes were swollen shut, and her head was just wrapped in a bandage. But I remember holding her hand, and someone that was someone that was a friend of my dad's, I can't remember who exactly it was, but they, I just remember them being religious, and they had given my dad 2 little, she called them prayer cloths, and they looked like just little pieces of green fabric. And I remember I put one of these prayer cloths underneath her pillow, and I kept the other one in this little box that I kept all of her things in. I have her accelerated reader, 100-point button or whatever, because she was such a reader. She read so many books, Harry Potter books, and I'm like, how are we 10 years old and this girl's reading books that are this thick? So all of these little things I still have in a little box, a little keepsake box. And actually that prayer cloth was buried with her. So that's buried with her, and I haven't opened the box in years, which I don't need to necessarily to remember her, because even as a 31-year-old adult, 21 years after this accident, I think of her all the time still. So after I had seen her in the ICU, which I want to say was probably the next day that I saw her, But like, as we were going to the hospital, I remember you can't not go out of my neighborhood unless you are actually at that intersection. So I remember leaving my house and going to see her at the hospital, and her scrunchie was laying in the middle of the road. And it's all marked up with spray paint and stuff because they were like investigating what exactly happened, like an X right here, like this is where she got hit in the crosswalk, and then a freaking outline over here, or not an outline, but like an X over here, that this is where she landed. So I don't know, to try and see maybe how fast the car was going. I don't know. And I mean, I know this poor guy, he had said that he just started a new job or something, and he was on his way home, and just the time of day, the sun was in his eyes, and he just didn't see her. And I mean, I feel for that guy too, because I couldn't imagine, like, you know, going through that and knowing that you hitting someone on their bike ended her life, you know? I'm sure this guy is still traumatized. After a few days, she was hit on a Monday. It was the beginning of that week, these parent-teacher conference week. So it was the beginning of the week on Monday, and I remember the day she got hit was October 27th, and then the day that she passed away, we got a call first thing in the morning. It was maybe like, what I can remember, maybe 4 or 5 in the morning, and I remember my mom was sleeping in my bed with me, and my dad came and woke her up. It was like, the phone's for you. And I remember her being like, oh gosh, you know, and they told her that she had passed away that morning. But what's crazy is that when I woke up that morning and like was told the news, I had a dream that night. And it's so crazy to me because 21 years later, I remember this dream, and it was like so vivid, so clear. It was like the corner that I talked about where her little angel statue is. It's right by this park called Hughes Park. I just see this big angel like come up from the ground almost, and it was so bright and beautiful and like the biggest wings, and it makes me want to cry because I'm just like, how is it 21 years later and I still remember this dream? Like, I can literally picture it in my head. You know, I just remember that, and my parents told me that she had passed away. So it's kind of was like one of those things like, oh my gosh, did that dream come to me like as she passed away? And I saw her, she's literally going to heaven, you know? And so I still remember that. And what's crazy to me too is that I have that story of Kyle too. It happened about a month or two after when I saw him in my dream, and he just turned and grabbed me and didn't say a word, and he kissed me. And I just remember that feeling, and it was almost like he was saying goodbye to me. And I feel like that dream of Ashley and seeing her go to heaven is like so similar to me seeing Kyle and him kissing me and saying goodbye. And I just like, that's just, I don't know. I'm so curious to see if anyone else has experiences like that, to be honest, because I know that those were both very significant to me, and I will always remember those two dreams right after they passed. I feel like what's even crazier about this whole thing is that Ashley passed away on October 29th, 2003. When Kyle and I found out we were having a baby, we were told our due date was November 1st of 2022. And right then I told Kyle, I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to be born. He's going to be born on the day that Ashley died. I just know it. And at midnight on October 29th of 2022, my water broke. And Brooks was born on the day that Ashley died. I just feel like that is like a sign from God right there that, you know, I was meant to have Brooks.
He was meant to be here for me. God knew what I was going to go through. And it was just like, this is this confirmation that you got to be here for this little boy. He was sent to you by your angel, Ashley. And I truly believe that. I really do. Like, what of all days? 365 days out of the year. And he was born on the day that was the most significant in my life at this time. Like, that was the most significant date that I've, at that point. And so, if you don't believe in God, I feel like that is one thing to get people to believe, because that's just crazy. But after the fact, after she passed away, I mean, I've definitely gone through some PTSD. I still, to this day, am terrified of crossing the street. And I guess I shouldn't say terrified. I just look about 50 times before I cross the street. And if I can see so far, it doesn't matter. I still sprint across the street because it scares me. And I even remember, like, leaving a Condors game one day with Kyle and our friends Kellen and Lexi. And we were walking, and Kyle, like, sprinted across the street to like jaywalk, and I screamed at him, "Oh my gosh." And I remember Lexi was like, "What, are you okay?" And I'm like, I'm fine. I'm sorry. That's just like, it just triggers me, it scares me, because maybe because of the fact that when Ashley went to cross the street and I called her, she was hit by a car, and so I still just get terrified of the road, and it is traumatizing. That's just so traumatizing. It's something, I don't know, I mean, I guess it gets easier over time, but I think that's always going to be in the back of my head, just being by any sort of busy street. Another thing, though, that I will say is that I remember going to counseling as a 10-year-old kid, and I feel so strongly about therapy and counseling and all of that stuff. It doesn't matter how young the kid is either. I really don't think it matters how young. I mean, maybe under, like young kids, maybe under 5. I'm not sure how that works, but I will say that I remember seeing my school counselor. So she was a school psychologist maybe, and I remember that it would be like every Friday I go to have lunch with her, and then it made it seem very casual to me that it wasn't counseling, it wasn't therapy, and I just remember I just loved her. I connected with her. She helped me a lot. I remember going through grief books and little activity books, and like when you lose a loved one and all that stuff, and I don't know if I could say that the books necessarily helped me, but I just do remember just counseling in general helped me. I know that my mom had tried to take me to like some other counselor at some point, and I was just like, nope, not doing it, not going to go back to that one, because I was lucky in the fact that I did connect with my first counselor right away. And I'm not saying that each kid is going to take to counseling. This is just my advice for if you do have a child that has gone through any trauma or grief. And this is just my experience. And I just, your kid might not connect with a counselor or someone right away. They might be a little bit more shy. I feel like I was pretty shy growing up. Not the case now, but I feel like I was pretty shy. So I don't know how I did it. But I do just remember that I loved her. I was in 5th grade. So when you go to junior high, obviously I'm not going to have this same counselor, but I do remember that she made an effort and still came and visit me in 7th grade when I was at the junior high too. And I even remember her telling my mom, like, she's like so mature for her age. And I do remember, like, even being in junior high, like, even some of the older kids, which was kind of weird for an older kid to even say that to you, but, like, you're mature for your age. You're not, like, annoying like these other kids or something. I clearly remember someone saying that to me. But I would say that's the trauma. That's the grief. It kind of makes you grow up and see the world in a different light. It's not just like I don't know, you lose a little bit of your innocence maybe because you have had to deal with something so real. And yeah, it does make you grow up. But talking about my parents again, it's just, I don't know how they did it. And it's funny because as much as I talk about grief and stuff, I actually haven't really talked to them about how they felt after Ashley passed away, and if, like, how did they deal with that? How did they deal with me? Which now maybe I need to pick their brain a little bit about it, but I couldn't imagine now having a son, and he's so small, but like, having him be 10 years old and watching his friend get hit by a car and seeing them in the ICU and having them pass away. I just don't know how I would even handle that, as much as I've even gone through grief myself. It's one thing to go through it yourself, but it's another to try and support someone that you love so much that has gone through it as well. So I commend my parents for that. I love my parents. They've been so great, especially even with all of this, with Kyle. My parents are my everything. They help me. They help me so much, and I'm just so extremely grateful for how good of parents they are and always have been. I just can't say it enough how much I truly believe in therapy and counseling, especially with childhood trauma and grief. Don't give up if the first counselor or therapist or whatever is not a good connection for your child. Like I said, I'm so grateful, and I'm so lucky that I did connect with my first counselor, because the second person my mom tried to take me to, I just remember I didn't feel comfortable for whatever reason. I was just 10 years old, I think I was just stuck in sticking with my other counselor, not realizing, well, she's a school psychologist, and she can't skip around every single school you go to. So just don't give up. That's my advice, because I just really believe that it helped so much. One way, too, that you can get started if you're unsure, Aspire actually has behavioral health location that helps in depression and grief and trauma. So if you don't know where to begin, you can start there. Just don't give up on it. And anyways, thank you guys for tuning into another episode and letting me cry and just share my childhood trauma that really, I feel like, shaped me into the person that I am. As always, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, and then you can watch full episodes on YouTube, or you can listen to episodes on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.